All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I am going to be doing introductions in 1 to 2 minutes. Let's let a few folks join and we'll go from there. But as you start to come online, please feel free to chat us where you're coming from. And if you have any questions, we have a Q&A function that we'll be happy to address at the later half of the webinar today. Welcome, Megan. Welcome, Darren and Ashley and Andrew, Janine, Shaylin and Sydney. Let us know where you're located. I am here in San Francisco, California. It's not as sunny as it usually is today. How about you, Maggie? Where are you located?
I'm based here in New York City.
Very nice.
Definitely not sunny here in New York City right now.
No, it's nice and cold, huh?
Yeah.
How about you, Sarah? You're in the Bay Area, is that right?
I am. Yes, I am.
All right, Ashley, welcome from Virginia. Awesome. A little bit chilly out by you too, I bet. All right. Give it a few more minutes. Okay. All right, Shaylin, welcome from Seattle. Hey, Jess, welcome from Sacramento. My brother's actually out in Tracy, pretty close. Awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and get started, and we'll just, again, please feel free to type in any questions that you'd like us to address or questions that come up during our webinar. My name is Shannon Hogue, and I'm the Global Head of Solutions Engineering here at Karat, and I am very pleased to be joined by Maggie Duvall, who's the Head of Technical Recruiting at Better.com, and Sarah Hollister, who's Recruiting Manager at Freedom Financial Network. Welcome, ladies. How about Maggie? Maggie, do you want to give a little bit of an extended introduction?
Yeah, sure. Like Shannon mentioned, my name is Maggie Duvall, and I'm Head of Tech Recruiting here at Better.com. And Better is a Series D startup headquartered in New York City. We have about 6,000 employees at this point in time, so a larger startup at this point. And we're a digital homeownership platform, which means that you can get your mortgage with us, your title insurance, and we're actively branching into the real estate agent space with the hopes of being able to provide home buyers a one-stop shop for everything they need in their home ownership journey. And we have a lot of hiring to do specifically on the engineering side this year, growing from about 200 engineers to hopefully 600 engineers by the end of the year.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Maggie. Sarah, how about you?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Sarah Hollister. And as Shannon mentioned, I'm the recruiting manager for Freedom Financial Network based out of California. And we've been in business for over 18 years. We are privately held and continuing to grow. Our remit is to help everyday Americans move forward with their financial security. So we're really in the space of helping people regain fiscal equilibrium and have a pretty broad suite of products. And this year we are really excited that Lendage, which is our HELOC product, is going full force. It's something we launched right before the pandemic started, and that really wasn't the place to be. So we pumped the brakes a bit, but we are back in full force. And like Maggie, we have very ambitious plans for growth this year around our technical team and some very cool things in our growth marketing arena, as well as product. And we're just hiring everywhere. We have our team in the Bay Area, and then we have a very large presence in Tempe, Arizona too. So just excited to be here to talk to everyone today.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. 2020 it's been a year. I know people keep saying that. And I know when we were preparing for this talk, we actually spoke a bit about layoffs. So a lot of developers were really surprised to find themselves, unfortunately, out of a job. And in fact, 70% of a certain travel company's developers are what we consider elite, and they laid off a quarter of their developers. So maybe we'll start, Maggie, with you. Did you find that this changed your recruiting strategy or your hiring process?
Yeah, I think we had to be more thoughtful and sensitive to some things that just due to the landscape, we needed to really think about and lean into last year. So first, the obvious with layoffs is that there are a lot more candidates unexpectedly in the market than usual. And I think first and foremost, we kind of wanted to put ourselves in their shoes and be sensitive to the fact that, like, if someone was unexpectedly laid off, it's kind of a jarring event, and wanted to be thoughtful around the candidate experience that we were providing folks who unexpectedly found themselves job searching. And also kind of leaning into what was a competitive advantage for Better, given that we were thinking that, people were unexpectedly laid off due to market conditions. They were probably extra sensitive and looking for companies that offered like more job stability, looking forward. And lucky for Better last year, due to the refinance rates being at an all-time low, it actually really helped our business and like drove up our business, also kind of unexpectedly in a positive way. And consequently, we like really ramped up on hiring. So we were able to offer that stability. So I think, being sensitive around like providing like a really great candidate experience for people who, are sensitive to that, and leaning into our competitive advantage of like being able to offer stability because the business was doing really well, was something that I think came from last year. I think the other piece is also being aware that different companies did their layoffs in different ways. Some companies had to cut like completely whole business units, so performance wasn't even a factor. Whereas other companies did do like a performance exercise, and performance was a factor in those layoffs. So I think on the HR side, like something we had to be extra mindful of was making sure that we had a really strong interview process that we trusted. So it was really like screening for folks who, were, perhaps laid off, just because of unfortunate events, or laid off due to performance, and making sure we trusted in our interview process for that.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. So it sounds like for the 2021 takeaway, to just continue to optimize the candidate experience and hiring process for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Cool. How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, so one of the things that I think, while it's really hard to have to lay people off and have reductions in force, but what I saw, and I think is so impressive of the talent community as an entity, is how many layoff lists are created, and how many people were true champions of their their former colleagues, fellow and former colleagues. And so we all had access to lists of some really great talent. And as a result, we found people were getting pinged 5 and 6 times a day. So you don't want to be the sixth person, right? It's like you're on The Bachelor and you're like, yeah, I only have 5 roses, you're out. So we definitely wanted to make sure that we had really tight employment, employee branding, our value proposition, like Better, we are very stable and we're growing. And I think when we focused and we're like, here we're a very mission-driven company, and because we've helped people who really encountered catastrophic debt through no fault of their own, and people were in that, our mission really resonates. That if you're in one of our programs, we're going to help you get back to a place of health, whether it's the lowering of your stress, the fact that you can afford to do things again. So it's really about how we focused in and how we give a very strong candidate experience. And I think those are things that they should always resonate. But I feel like that's something where we're like, what, maybe we can't compete with some people in terms of name recognition, but we can definitely compete with the quality of the work we have. So we just had some really great pivots around that.
Oh, that's great. That mission-driven approach is so huge for folks, especially right now. And I guess with the job market shaken up and tons of growth for both Freedom Financial and for Better.com, did you find it was harder for your team to get the right hiring signal in interviews last year? Sarah, what did you see? What were a few themes?
I think that it's we're so lucky we have a really great TA team, and they make it their mission to really get to know their candidates and find out just what's going to appeal to them. And I think as we were talking about a couple weeks ago, the great thing about us is about just hiring in the Bay Area. In a lot of places, you can look at it as competition, or you can look at it, there's a place in a company for everyone. And I firmly believe that. That's like, I'm like, competition, yes, but more importantly, people can find their homes. So that's when we have that mindset of, let's make sure we've got people who want us to be their home, as opposed to people who are just collecting more offers. Like, we're not here to pat an ego. We're here to find the right people who feel connected to our business.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier to get through the tough times when you believe in the mission. That's for sure. How about you, Maggie?
Yeah, I would actually say it was probably less kind of like 2020 and market conditions that drove us to try to figure out how to get a better hiring signal, and more just like pure growth of the business that our company was going through. I think we had like around 50 engineers starting off 2020. And ended the year with around 200. And now we are like scaling and hiring like, so much faster than we ever have before. And the way that you hire a handful of engineers is very different than the structure and the process that you need to put in place when you're trying to hire hundreds of engineers. And so I think it was probably less about like market conditions, but more about like the need for scale and growth that really drove us to like need to reevaluate kind of our interview processes. And we put a lot of thought around that and did a lot of work around that last year. And coming to Karat was one of the things that came from that like evaluation as well. And so I think more due to the growth and scale, just kind of the unique circumstances that we were in.
Makes sense. Sarah, I saw your head going up and down a bit. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think just making sure that people now more than ever are working to make sure that they give, a great experience, and I really feel that empowering people to ask questions they need to get answered in interviews with, respect. And I think as we talked about like things like, there's a bad Glassdoor review, we're going to talk to you about it and say, hey, here's something that we found. How can we course correct? Not to say tisk tisk, but to really say, listen, that this is a gift. Like, someone's cared enough to give us feedback. And so I think that's something as we continue to evolve. And we've had a great upward trend of our hiring managers. They're calling candidates for one more conversation, sometimes one more after that, and really making sure that people feel good in this environment.
Yeah, that's really, really important right now. Not everyone is remote ready. A hiring manager and interviewers, communication is a big factor in successful relationships with colleagues and with candidates. So Maggie, I guess just touching a little bit more on that, how have you prepared hiring managers and your internal interviewers for remote candidate experiences?
Yeah. It's so crazy how the world has evolved to like remote first over this last year so quickly. And I think, when we think about remote interviewing and providing a good candidate experience, I think foundationally, it seems like a simple thing to like tell people the need to be present, but empathizing with the fact that like it's really easy in a remote world when you have two screens, for example, to not actually be fully present and giving the person on the other end of the screen like your full attention in the interview. So I think like really reiterating, like, please, please, please be fully present with the person you're speaking to, because people can tell. And so, coaching them to like have their screen on when they interview somebody else, make sure like you don't have anything up at the same time, your Slack is down, and just like really try to like give them their full attention, because the candidates deserve it, whether or not they're going to get an offer or not. And then I think that I think different companies have taken different approaches with this, but like it's been kind of cool. At Better specifically, culturally, the norm here is that people actually don't use Zoom backgrounds. And I think it's like kind of cool because it kind of helps like empathize and like humanize like the person on the other end a little bit. You get to know them beyond like purely their professional sense. So like clearly you can like maybe understand some of my personal hobbies like here right now. And, additionally, I think that is interesting because it like hopefully gives the impression that you can bring your full self to the interview, and like, we are employees at Better, but like we are holistically employees that have extracurriculars and things outside of work too. And I think that is like something that is a cool cultural element that Better has had specifically.
I love that. I love that. How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, so I would agree with what Maggie is saying about just all those things about making sure people have their focus, right? Because you can tell if someone's doing this, and so we've also been leaning into it with our managers and reminding them, this isn't normal. This is not BAU. Yes, you may have had a video conference here and there, but you generally aren't spending like 5 and 6 hours on Zoom or whatever it is. So having some empathy for the candidates as well, and knowing that this is all new territory for a lot of people, and making sure that you're engaged. So if someone's giving you an answer, if you're taking notes, let them know, like, hey, I'm going to be taking some notes, making sure that they understand that. I think that's always a good lesson. And if they've got a specific question, really getting into it and rephrasing, saying it back to them. I think that that's really helped. It's that slow down to speed up. I think that's something that's really been very helpful to our organization, as well as we've built some very thoughtful interview guides to help people. And we'll have the prep meetings and make sure that they're all in alignment. And then while we all may either use our virtual backgrounds or our real backgrounds, I always think it's fun if people's pets come running through, or their children. I'm like, again, this is where we are. And let's just celebrate that. Like, this is how, and I know we'll go into our next, but this is how we build an inclusive culture.
No, I love that. And that's so important, actually. And we are going to get into DEI. In fact, a lot of folks, we've heard a lot of hiring managers call an all remote kind of 2020 the ultimate DE&I accelerator, and expanding the geographic areas where you source candidates and building out objective interviewing and hiring processes are key for diversity and inclusion. And so I guess actually, I'll start with Sarah, since you had just touched on it. Talk to me a little bit how and if remote hiring has helped with your diversity strategy.
It really has. I mean, I think that one of the things that we've done is, whether it's using Karat or coaching people, it's getting beyond the bias of what's on the paper and encouraging people have the conversations. Here's the thing, while you may not feel it's sticky, I think about some of the interviews we've had in, the Bay Area is known for its traffic, right? And one day we had someone who was, 25 miles north interviewing with someone who was 25 miles east. And then with me, who's 10 miles south. And I thought, gosh, if this person had to come in for the day, they would have been home by like 7:00 in the evening. But here they can get it done. So it's kind of that, like, if we just get in and really focus on what matters, I think, around the work, and encouraging our managers. And I think our teams have been very successful that, diversity and inclusion take many forms, and diversity of thought is so important. I think that gets overlooked a lot of times. And so when we use tools like a Karat with our interview questions, it's like you can really get people's thought process. And we're hearing that more and more from our managers. It's, I'm not going to hire from, the branded companies necessarily. Yeah, that's good, but how do people think? How do they work? And I think that's allowed us to continue. It's a huge initiative for us for 2021. And when I look at my team and our efforts, I can see that. But I think it's really like you have this opportunity to be focused on someone. You're not worried about traffic and getting home or anything else. And so I think it's really allowed people to be very human and focused on each other.
I love that. And with their babies and puppies and cats running around, I know my cat tends to show up every time I'm doing an event.
And if you guys need me, you have to know my cats are like waiting outside the door.
Yeah.
If my team were here, they would tell you that they usually break in at least once or twice a week.
For sure. Mine will open the door randomly, and if I don't let him in, he makes a mess of
Here.
Yeah, for sure. How about for you, Maggie? Are you kind of seeing acceleration of your diversity and inclusion at Karat?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has actually really helped us quite a bit is Better, similar to a lot of companies, have loosened up the restrictions on where we are willing and able to hire people, specifically in engineering. And so, what that has done for us is, there are cities that have like higher populations of underrepresented talent that we need. And so it has allowed us to like tap into different cities that otherwise we like haven't been able to, different cities and, and ultimately different candidates. So I think that has been really great for the recruiting team. And then I think, something that has been nice that I like from kind of like an inclusivity angle, but also circling back to some of the remote interviewing challenges and things, given like where we are today. One of the really nice things I think about Karat and what they offer is the ability for 24/7 tech screens, so you can schedule it, whenever is convenient for you. Being sensitive to the fact that people have like a lot going on right now outside of, work. And so making sure that we provide like a variety of options for them to like be able to feel like they're able to put their best foot forward based on, what their obligations are outside of work right now. So I think that is something that like we have leaned into with the Karat product that I think helps with inclusive hiring in the state that we're working with too, with COVID.
Yeah, and I remember when we were talking, it sounds as if you will be expanding the cities that you're looking into and kind of the underrepresented developer talent that's available there. Is that something that you continue to do for 2021, is to expand and look at other cities?
Yeah, we have. I think it just expands the top of the funnel for our sourcing team, which is really great and has like helped us increase our hiring numbers. Very generously, the company also has committed to paying a New York salary band, regardless of where you are located in the United States. So I think that's like really generous and certainly gives us like a really great competitive edge when it comes to trying to find talent too.
Yeah, for sure. Sarah, are you also looking to expand to other cities in the US?
We have, and I think what's really been interesting about 2020 going into 2021, say that 3 times fast, right? We were not a company that had remote employees. When I started, it was you were there every day, and which is very counterintuitive maybe to even how the Bay Area runs. However, one of the things about our leadership team is their ability to pivot, and they're very open-minded. And I think that again, we are now able to hire remotely. We have been doing so. To Maggie's point, it increases the diversity pool. It also decreases the chance of everybody coming from one company. I think because when you're in different markets, there are different employers. So instead of one person coming from a certain company bringing all their pals, well, we love employee referrals. Now maybe there are people in other parts of the country. So it's really creating this culture of this is how we do it at Freedom versus this is how we did it at our past company. And, as it's interesting too, with the salary, I think that's a very fascinating topic, and I'm sure you'll have a full webinar on that at some point. But what we're seeing is the delta is closing. Yes, there are some places where things are significantly less, but not everywhere. And it is really great to bring, high paying jobs to areas maybe where there weren't as many. So again, I think the shift into remote, it just really helps lift everybody. And, when we can all be back together, that'll have some fun travel stories too, right? So I think that it's great to see the shift. We'll see how the next few years go. If companies stay virtual, like everything brings a shift, and it's how you grow and evolve from it. So like I said, we're really happy that we can just keep looking for people who have that mission driven mindset and the growth mindset wherever they may reside.
Yeah, actually, we ended up, and I love that because we do, like, our headquarters are in Seattle, and we tend to see a lot of folks from Amazon or Microsoft, and so it's really fun to be able to expand out to other cities for talent, especially for solutions, because we have clients all over the world. So it's definitely a different practice, and we miss each other, but certainly that expansion of diversity has been helpful for us. So
Yeah, great talent lives everywhere.
for sure. Absolutely. We also are seeing people move to different cities that previously had lived in the Bay Area, which is hyper expensive. And so we're seeing some movement towards places like Austin or Pittsburgh. But I guess we could probably do a whole webinar about that too. We had actually, before we move forward, we had a question from the audience asking, how large are your TA teams that are focused on hiring developers? Maggie, how about we start with you? I know you're growing really fast, so.
Yeah. So I cover tech recruiting, which includes engineering, data, product, and design. And currently our team is about 22 individuals. And I think we'll probably land closer to 30 here when we're fully staffed. And that is for like all of those groups.
Amazing. How about you, Sarah?
So we're in the middle of growing the TA team. I'm just going to put that out there right now, because we are growing, not at the same numbers, but we currently have 3 technical recruiters, our sourcer. We have one of our growth marketing leads leaning into product, and then we'll be adding. So we have 2 more people starting. So it's going to look a little different because, again, I think I'll probably say this a million times, our motto is velocity plus quality equals success. So that's something that we want to do and bring on the recruiting team to get that mantra that they say the extra mile has less traffic. So we want to people that like to spend that time on the extra mile. So we're growing. I don't get to 30, but we're growing.
You're growing and having to employ so many new processes, actually. And in fact, one of the other questions that came through was, have either of you made changes to the final stage hiring loops? More, fewer, with different team members? What kind of changes have you made, and what will stick for 2021?
I can take that first. And I'd say that we made changes that people have been very focused. So while the number of interviews may have gone down a little or gone up in some places, that we're really checking in with hiring managers and offering very focused final conversations with candidates. So while it might seem like, gosh, this is just another step, it's actually allowing our time to fill to drop. And having people come in and say, because the other end of it is retention, right? Like you can do this fabulous job, but if you don't retain, and our attrition rate in technology is really close to 10%. So we do a great job there. And our average tenure of our developers is double that of the Valley. So we want to keep that up, and we feel like adding these conversations with the hiring manager or a VP just adds to it. So, we've sped up the front end by using Karat and very streamlined interviews so we can put the time in on the close.
Gotcha. Maggie, I saw your head. You're like, yes.
Yeah, we have made a few changes to our final interview loop this last year, kind of as part of the initiative to look at our final interviews with a critical lens and how can we tighten them up, make it more effective and efficient and get people through faster too. So one of the things we last year, we initially had 5 portions of the final interview, which that's a very thorough final interview and a lot of time. We reduced it to 4, and ultimately what we ended up cutting out was, for engineering specifically, historically they included one of those portions was an interview with the product manager that they would be working with. Because of the volume of hiring we have to do this year, we have really run into a challenge with the amount of time that interviewers are having to give for interviews this year. So ultimately what we landed on was the product organization has to do so many interviews of their own for the product this year, and engineers have to do so many of their own for the engineering organization, that we kind of pulled that out. So only engineering interviews for engineers and only product interviews for product at this point. So that was one of the changes that we made. And then I think we also looked through with a more critical lens, the remaining 4 sections, what were the questions that were being asked in each of those sections, and do those map to a competency that is outlined on our career ladder. So in doing that, we've hopefully, helped eliminate some bias, making sure we're doing structured interviewing and everything is competency based. That's been some of the tweaks that we've made recently.
No, that's great. And it's great practice. It's really important to keep that objectivity and understand who's covering what and what kind of signal that you're getting. And in fact, that leads a little bit into another question, which our attendee said this isn't necessarily about 2021, but how are you aligning expectations with the engineering team about speed and volume specifically? And also, did your key metrics change for 2020 versus 2021? And I guess also probably be helpful for these folks if you both could talk about what key metrics that you're looking at as well. So maybe I'll start with Sarah this time.
Yeah, so with our key metrics, I'll take that first. When we look at D&I, time to fill, those are some big ones, and manager satisfaction as well as candidate satisfaction, because we want to have a holistically positive experience. And so those are things that we measure. And we've seen improvements across the board, which is phenomenal. And I think that's just an attribution to our leadership, my boss, all of our teams for committing to this and making sure that we have a really great process, and really recognizing that, because we're a consumer facing company, our bar is even higher for the way we treat people. I mean, it should be high. You should always treat people with respect, but the fact that people can choose to work with us or go to a competitor or, a nonprofit, we always want to be on point with that. And then as it relates to some educational pieces for our managers, we always want to explain that, yes, there were layoffs and slowdowns, but that doesn't mean that there's a vending machine of full stack developers just waiting for us. We're just not going to press the button and somebody's going to come out. And so I think it's always even when you read these things, there's still a very intense job market. And so for the people that have been like, gosh, I've seen 50 people, and I mean, good people, what else is there? Nothing, you've done it, enough. So I think that that's something that was some education in 2020 that, yes, there are great companies who've had to shed some talent, but to Maggie's first point, not all of it is optimal talent, and it's still in demand. So really helping that, I think that was a big piece of 2020, was how you educate people. And, again, it's when tensions are high. I think I've seen a lot more public airing of grievances of interview processes for companies. On LinkedIn, you see those stories and you're just like, oh, it's hard, but it's also making sure that you're not one of them, I think, is probably the best way to put that.
For sure. How about you, Maggie? Sounds like you agree.
Yeah, totally. I think the metrics that we're focusing on and rooting some goals for 2021 on are ultimately increasing our representation across our recruiting funnels. That's one. decreasing our time to hire, similar to one that it sounds like Sarah's team's focused on, keeping a pulse on our acceptance rates. And then this one's like a little bit less quantifiable, but an aim to improve our stakeholder management that we are giving to our hiring managers from the recruiting angle too. So I'd say those are like the 4 metrics we're focused on. I don't know if I would say like we probably would have rooted some goals around them for last year too, but Better as a company is like really building out our like recruiting data infrastructure that like now we're actually in a position where we can root and quantify some of those goals for the first time ever. So they're probably like not different year to year, but this year we'll actually be able to be better at tracking them, I think. And then, like touching on how do you set expectations with the hiring managers you're working with on some of these goals and challenges and proposals to like make these better. I'd actually say that like kind of loops into the goal to improve our stakeholder management. And ultimately, what we aim to do, we have a monthly check-in with all of our engineering leadership, and we show quantitatively like where we are with each of these goals. And then we draw insights from the change, like if it went up, why? If it went down, why? Here are the things we're doing to improve, here are the blockers, and here's what we need from you to make this happen. So the aim there is to have a monthly pulse check-in with everybody. So they're like brought along in the journey. And they get clear action items on like, here's what I need from you to help my team make this better for you. That has been our approach. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully we'll be able to achieve these goals and make these better for this year.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, someone is asking a question right now, and they said, sorry if I missed it, but how many developers or total heads are your TA teams hiring monthly or yearly? It sounds like, Maggie, you have a ton of growth coming, and Sarah, for you as well. So how about Sarah? How about I have you go first?
Yeah, so we had it's so funny, we got our target for the beginning of the year of net new heads, and literally myself and then another lead recruiter met with all the VPs. And I'm like, so that's like my first half of the year request. And so, or we have another division president's like, you hire 1, I'm going to open 3 more recs. I'm like, okay. So I think while we won't double our team in size, I would say we'll probably lift it by 25%. And, going into some areas as our company's evolved, it's pretty neat, like, building out more of a CX UX function. Last year we built out our MarTech function, and they give themselves a title change and a promotion to CX. So we're going to go ahead and continue with that. And like any good head of QA, the head of QA is like, I want 100 people. And I'm like, no, it is QA. Like for those of you out there that hire in that field, they're like, we will take everybody. So it's a pretty aggressive goal.
Wow, amazing. That's such good news though, for job seekers for sure. Maggie, how about for you?
Yeah, we also have like very aggressive hiring goals, and I'm like staffing my team to hopefully be able to hit. But currently we're around 200 engineers, and at the end of the year we're hoping to be at 600. So a lot of hiring to do, and about a quarter of that will ultimately be like campus hires as well, which is a little bit of a different type of hiring, I think.
Hell yeah, we were talking about that. That entire kind of industry has changed. And Sarah, you had mentioned it impacts all sorts of different businesses along the way. I don't know if you wanted to touch on that briefly.
Oh, sure. It isn't true. We're talking about that interns and where they live. And I was sharing before the call that we have an apartment building by my home, and it was like the Facebook LinkedIn internship building. And so it's been interesting to see what the true domino impact is to things like when you're remote, and how you build that culture of stickiness in the intern and new grad population. So I think that's something, there are a lot of dominoes that I think as we all think through 2021, how will those fall back into place?
Yeah, but hopefully it sounds as if we learned quite a bit, and we're adding processes that will kind of consist and persist for the next few years. So that's always good. And in fact, we have a question a little asking around, are your teams doing any interviewer training with engineers to create better candidate experiences and get better signal? And I think that's a great question, especially since you both have touched a little bit on that. But maybe Maggie, if you wouldn't mind for this person, go into a little bit more details. How are you working with your engineers and product managers as you start to scale so quickly and keep an eye on quality?
Yeah, it's a great question. With all of the hiring we have to do this year, we have needed to get more and more engineers trained to actually interview for us, so we can actually do the number of interviews we need to be able to make those hires. Our approach to that has been catching it up front to the extent that we can. So we have the interviewers who are actively interviewing for us, and we did one batch interviewer training with that group. And we said, great, everybody who is actively interviewing has been trained. And then going forward, knowing that we're ramping up and training and throwing a ton of new people into our interview loops, we have operationalized an interview training process for them. So if they are nominated or tapped to help us interview, they have to sit through an hour-long interviewer training, an interviewer training portion that one of our engineering managers leads, and then they shadow 3 interviews, and then they're reverse shadowed on 3 interviews, and then they are like released into the wild to interview themselves. But it has been a pretty operationalized process there, and ultimately our recruiting coordinators are the ones who own that for us. So we're super thankful, and it's like quite a luxury that we have a coordination team to support us on that.
Yeah, for sure. Sarah, how about you? Any thoughts?
Yeah, so we spent a lot of the first half of 2020 building out interview guides, training our teams on how to use them. And so now what we're doing is we're going, and it just literally kicks off next week, so I can tell you how it goes. But we're going back through and meeting with the VPs and their leadership team about everything. Whether it's, we're going to talk to the Karat team, like how is this going? How's calibration? We're talking about, do we have the right questions in place? How are the teams doing? We're going to share feedback on that. And because we are growing, we're onboarding new employees who will be part of the interview panels too. So it's that continuous improvement, continuous education. And as we onboard new recruiters too, that we're making sure they're trained in how we do things.
Yeah, I love that. I was speaking with a gentleman who's a VP at Salesforce over their data science teams. And, one thing that he's employed, and I don't know if this is, kind of, you've seen this before for your teams, but he will build out leveling based on kind of job description and requirements. And that way, when he's working with his teams, he'll work with them to get their feedback on the competencies that they should be measured by, and in turn, using those same competencies and set up to interview and level engineers who are coming on board. So I've seen a lot of kind of processes come into play with a lot of our clients. I don't know if that's something either of you have employed, or if you have similar systems to help engineers, because quite frankly, I grew up as an engineer and nobody really teaches you how to interview. I think I was asking the same 3 questions for 10 years straight. So
we do. We have our questions by level. And I mean, it's something that's important. And then we'll have those conversations too about, maybe they'd fit, for a staff, but they're more of a senior or vice versa. But we've actually done that. I think we've also worked with your team on our Karat, where we've got some different levels of exams too. So it's a twofold. It's both that technical screen and then the questions. And if we find there might be, I don't want to say disconnect, but if there's a difference in where someone started to where they may finish with us, we're going to jump in and have those conversations and say, here's what you're going to want to ask, and here's what you're going to want to calibrate against.
I love that. How about for you, Maggie? Do you have any tools that you're using to facilitate? Outside of course, the 1-hour training that you already have with your teams. I didn't know if there's anything you wanted to add in addition. We have some more questions though, so no worries if not.
Like tool specific to training?
Yeah, so if you have specific levels of folks coming in, and I know that you have engineers working with hiring managers that have kind of been certified at your company? Are you using specific rubrics or question sets that everybody's working from, or is it more kind of here's the guidelines, but go ahead and deep dive for a particular competency?
Yeah, got it. Yes, we do have rubrics for each module in the final interview. And it breaks down, here are the questions, and then based on the answer, you can kind of map it to this answer maps to a level 3, 4, 5, depending on like the strength of the answer or how in-depth the answer is. So I guess that, that is probably, sounds like kind of similar to maybe what Sarah's team has as a tool. We also have that available, and that is in our applicant tracking system. So in theory, each interviewer should be putting their feedback in relation to that rubric. So I'd say that is something that we've tried to create some structure around to help guide people in the right direction too.
I love that. Awesome. So another question that came through is there anything that you stopped doing in 2020 that was inefficient that you won't do again in 2021? Maybe Maggie, we'll start with you this time on that.
Yeah. I feel like we tried a lot of new things last year, which, is really great to have the opportunity to, innovate and kind of iterate upon that. One of the things, this is more around recruiter alignment, something that we tried last year, and we made some tweaks to that I think are better starting this year. Last year, because of the crazy increase in volume in hiring that we needed to do, we aligned our recruiting team by job profile. So a candidate would be interviewed for a full stack engineer position, and the communication to the candidate throughout the process would be many of our teams are hiring full stack engineers. Will move you through the interview process, and then after the interview, based on our team's needs and your skill set and interests, you'll be matched to a team at offer stage. And so our recruiters were aligned that way, and we were distributing offers at the offer stage. And I would say the success of that was it really increased our volume and output of the amount of offers and candidates we could get through. But the downfall of that was that our acceptance rate actually dropped rather significantly because, recruiters weren't able to have as in-depth conversations at the beginning with candidates about what are your career interests? Let me map you to a team from the beginning that is going to be a good fit. And additionally, it meant that our recruiters were working with multiple hiring managers, so they weren't able to develop that relationship with their one hiring manager or stakeholder. So this year we have aligned our recruiters to directors to allow them to do that. And then our sourcers on the back end are still sourcing by job profile. So we made that slight tweak. And since we've made that tweak, we have seen our acceptance rates increase. And I think that's probably one of the things we could point to is maybe helping with that.
Amazing. How about for you, Sarah?
Yeah.
Anything you stopped doing? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, I think I don't know if it's a stop that we did or so much just process improvement. I think that what we had to really help people on was when you're interviewing in person, right? You're taking part of a day, half a day off or chunking at time. Whereas when you're home, you're trying to slot it in. And so when we first started this, people were spreading interviews out. They're I can do a half an hour here and an hour there. And what we went back in and coached everybody, whether it was our retained partners or our internal teams, was let's have candidates treat this like they're going in for a full day interview, because it was just people were spending too long in process. And so once we reposition this, yes, while you may be at home and doing this in your jammy bottoms, it's still take it in the block if you can, because sometimes it would drag on, and then there's interest loss on both sides. So once we said let's treat it like a formal interview process that you'd be on site for, things our time to fill went down again, and our acceptance rate went up because people were engaged the whole time. They're not and it didn't give them time to go out and see who else was hiring.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, one of the metrics that we are always looking at is their time inside of the process, because it is such a competitive environment for engineers, especially now that we're remote. And we don't have any other questions that I see, but please feel free to ask additional questions if you'd like. We have about 10 minutes. I thought I'd bring it back to where we started and close out with a call back to the beginning of our conversation. So increased competition for talent after layoffs in 2020. Um, is it going to ultimately change the way that you recruit in 2021, and how? And I'll go ahead and ask for some final thoughts around that from Sarah first.
Yeah, I think it's just always being mindful about when you're recruiting and be empowered. And if someone tells you, hey, I'm in final stages with 3 other companies, wish them luck and stay in touch, as opposed to trying to shove somebody through. So I think that we found that a lot of success when we went back through some of those lists, like 3 and 4 months later, because people had taken a break. It's a blow when you are riffed, and some people just took that time to heal, or kind of figure out things with this pandemic or move. So I think it's very much, no matter where you work in TA and anything, you need to be proud of where you work. And if you can't be proud of that, you probably A, you shouldn't be recruiting, and B, you should probably look for another company. So I think it's like that's something we're taking forward, that we're not the right place for everybody. We know that, but let's be proud of who we are. Let's not apologize for being a privately held company. Some of those things, let's lead that. And I think that that's something where wherever you work, you should be proud of. And if you can't figure out why you're in the wrong place. So I think we're going to take that sense of pride and purpose and just keep moving forward.
I love that. And as you said earlier, velocity and quality.
Yes, for sure. For sure.
All right, Maggie, how about for you? Any closing thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think what we are taking into 2021 with the certainly from last year, but always super competitive engineering talent market. I think something we're really trying to focus on this year is investing in our employer branding. Internally, I think the sentiment is that we have an amazing engineering team that's super collaborative. People are really passionate, working hard on things that they feel really driven, mission driven by. And I think that's a really great thing. But I think we need to do a better job of getting the sentiment that we feel internally and flipping that to be able to tell that story externally, because we want to be able to explain why working at Better in engineering specifically is a really cool opportunity in comparison to all of these other companies that are also hiring engineers. So I think a real focus, and hopefully you'll be hearing more from better.com in that area this year. That's an area we're going to make a lot of investment in.
I love that. And you both really touched on the importance of speaking about your brand stability as well, especially with these, not so structured times that we find ourselves in. So I appreciated that. Well, I think unless anyone has any more questions, mostly I wanted to say thank you both so much for joining me today and having this conversation. I know for sure I learned a bunch, and it's super helpful for folks to be able to reach out and ask you questions, and you both handled that so well and with such grace and knowledge. I want to thank the folks who joined us today. I'm sure that afterwards we'll be posting a link to the recording so that you have access to the questions that were answered and a lot of the great knowledge that was brought. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of the week and take good care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for including me.
Thank you.